So first up in our second session, which is titled Future Fit Quality and Qualifications, Exploring Digital Transformation, I'm happy to introduce Tony Murphy, the Academic Dean of Dublin Business School. Tony is going to moderate this next session, introducing colleagues and chairing a short panel discussion. The session will be led by Professor Mark Brown, Director of the National Institute for Digital Learning at DCU. And Mark will provide us with a helicopter overview of future trends in digital transformation. Mark and his team at DCU are also leading out on a QQI project to develop online statutory QA guidelines. Remember, you can use the Slido app to post any questions, and we will get the answers back to you. So over to you, Tony Murphy, the Academic Dean of Dublin Business School.
Thank you very much and good morning. We're going to kick off this plenary session with Professor Mark Brown giving us a guided whistle-stop tour through digital transformation that will touch on flies, caterpillars and Francis Bacon as he delves into the future trends on digital transformations and their likely impact on the Irish higher education system. Professor Jacqueline McCormick from ATU and Associate Professor Blonnet White from DCU will then use case studies on the Higher Education 4.0 project and DCU's Future Experience project, respectively, to show how providers can respond to these trends and offer some key lessons on harnessing the potential of digital transformation. After which, the presenters will be joined by Amanda Butler of the Kilkenny and Carlow Education and Training Board, and myself and Walter Balfe from QQI for a discussion which will touch on such topics as what does digital transformation mean for practical skills, how much transformation are we actually seeing, and whether or not digital transformation can help QA through increasing standardization. So with all this potentially unsettling change, it is important to remember that we are all simply working to facilitate and verify learning for societal value. And that whatever transformation is taking place, somehow that helps us support achieving those goals. So with that, I'll pass you over to Professor Mark Brown.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you here in person. I'm a bit out of practice in talking to a real audience rather than down the Teams or Zoom lens. I want to start by saying that digital transformation is a bit like fly spray. You kind of spray it about. You can see the mist. You can usually smell it. Not everyone reacts well to the smell. But after a minute or so, there's actually not much to see. What is it? Where is it? And so there's a lot of kind of mystique written around digital transformation. One thing that's very rarely acknowledged in terms of the concept of transformation is that usually transformation leads to winners and losers. Let's hope there's not too many losers amongst us on the floor by the end of the conference. The other part to definitions of DX, to make it sound a little bit more exciting, digital transformation, is it's really infused with the language of technological determinism, when it's really much more about cultural change, deep and challenges to the ways we've done things in the past, to inherently question our value proposition, if you like. Here's a recent definition, only just published a matter of weeks ago, about digital transformation in the context of digital technologies for teaching and learning. And again, in this definition, you see the strong focus, albeit that it's multi-dimensional, but a strong focus on improvements without necessarily acknowledging that this is not always better. So the literature, again, is woven with the rhetoric of the way in which transformation is going to make our lives, our learning, better. And the rhetoric conjures up this image of digital transformation being a bit like the butterfly that emerges from the chrysalis. It sort of happens almost overnight. You can see it. It's a real thing. Well, this is quite a nice quote because I want to challenge this kind of imagery in terms of thinking about digital transformation, because Westman said that that digital transformation, yes, can result in the butterfly, the beautiful butterfly, maybe a moth on occasions, but more often than not, in many respects, it's just a fast caterpillar going even faster. So what I'm trying to do here is just set the scene, challenge our thinking a little bit, and I want to keep things as simple as possible. It's a trait I like to capture in my work. So I want to just talk about digital transformation in a very simple way, in the way it has benefited my life, and possibly yours as well, in respect to digital transformation with a big T or a small t. I didn't come today by taxi, but I'm going to be catching a taxi not too long later today. And during the COVID crisis, a really small t transformation, impactful small t transformation, was that taxis took cards in Dublin, in Ireland, I think. That meant I no longer had to make sure I had cash in my wallet, or when I'm at the airport, go to the cash machine before I line up. For me, this was really quite transformative as a process, a small t process. We might take it for granted now, but it really, for those people who arrive from the States without euro in their wallet, quite a big transformation when they've realized they can't use their cards. So I don't know if that resonates with you, but I want to extend this a little further, because there is a risk when we're talking about digital transformation that we have false clarity, because the taxi example still gets me to the same destination. Where I go hasn't been transformed, just the process, a small t transformation. Well, the use of new technology in education has a very long history. This comes from the work of Skinner and with pigeons, and here we have in the 1950s and in the 60s, the development of the teaching machine that was going to transform education. Have a look at this and see if you make any connections. A group of pigeons there I think it might be Teams, or I might be doing a disservice. You know, the more things change, the more things stay the same. Perhaps it's Zoom. Doesn't really matter, does it? And we're hearing a lot about hybrid learning. And this is a real example. You can see the university it comes from. Synchronous hybrid learning, bringing people remotely into the live class. False clarity in that the underlying pedagogy has not changed. They're in rows. It's a bit sad they're all men too. I believe it's an engineering subject, but nothing has fundamentally changed. The technology has, but the underlying pedagogy has not. So I think we would need to be very careful when we're thinking about digital transformations that we don't fall into the habit, which is what history has taught us, of merely trying to tame the technology according to the ways we've done things previously. This particular model is quite critiqued in the literature, but it's a useful visual to give you a sense of most discussions around digital transformation are not truly at that redefinition, reimagination end. Not to suggest that there's anything wrong with enhancements either. I want to give you a few examples. I've only got a few minutes left, but to capture what we sort of understand about digital transformation and the literature that I tend to place more emphasis on. Clearly, it's not an end point, it's a journey. There's a process that we're going through. Very rarely do we see something overnight fundamentally change. And it's also multifocal or multi-faceted in the number of dimensions that are affected. So that's just a recent kind of definition in the literature. Earlier this year, I published this very quick paper. Sounds a bit now, I'm saying it like self-promotion, not intended to be. I'm only going to capture a handful of these bigger picture transformations to concretize some of what we will then talk about putting into practice. The point of sharing this is if you're welcome to read in more detail. So one of the things I think is really interesting, my first example, we have entered the era of the commercialization, the platformization of education, but typically these crucial stakeholders, a multi-billion industry, do not come to these sorts of events. I'm not sure, maybe I'm wrong. Where are these stakeholders when we're discussing what quality and qualifications look like? For me, they need to be around the table. We need to be around the table with them, and there's a tendency to polarize, almost demonize the OPX or the OPM sort of sector. So that's a challenge. And a subset of that, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this initiative that occurred during the pandemic. No university involved here in the unbundling of qualifications. Just last week in Australia, Google announced 20,000 free scholarships for Google career certificates. No university involved. So we're going to be talking about micro-credentialing at the end of the conference, or towards the end, I believe. So I won't elaborate. So that's big tech examples. Here's a small tech example of the unbundling of student support services. In this case, this is a writing support service and writing development service. We actually trialed this quite successfully at DCU, where students can use this any time of the day, and they get feedback on their assignments before they submit them within a KPI of 48 hours. We found it was more like 24 hours. You might not be able to see that clearly, but what we found from the analytics is the students used this service 7 days a week, no drop-off, and the time in which they were using it was like when our physical writing centre closed. So an example of third-party unbundling that enhances the quality of the student experience, but also raises on many other challenges. Third example, set against the big ed tech that I showed you in the commercialisation, is the openness movement. It's kind of almost polarized, and the openness movement is a movement. It's about an ethos of openness, embracing openness as an ethos where ultimately quality almost exists in the crowd or the cloud. And this is right at the opposite in many respects of the commercial sort of agenda that I shared as the first example. I don't have time to elaborate further, but for me, the openness movement, we heard about open science from Linda. This is one of the big trends that we're seeing. Then I can't not touch on the role that AI is having. It's in your pocket right now, or in your purse or handbag or wallet or whatever it might be, that probably not your wallet unless it's super small. But this is a piece we just wrote a couple of weeks ago. You right now can have your essay or your journal article written by AI. This is not fictional, this is possible now. What does this mean for quality? Is it cheating for someone to do this? We once said it was cheating if you used a spell checker. I remember when I did that and I was told I was cheating. So there are fundamental questions here, what this means for academic integrity. And last example, because I know I'm going to get the evil eye from Tony in a second, we hear a lot about the metaverse. Remember I said digital transformations infused by the language of technological determinism. There's a long history of failed innovations here. I struggle with the real world, let alone wanting to be in a metaverse or a virtual world. But we shouldn't deny what the possibilities are. This could fundamentally change what we understand interaction to mean, and the way in which we can interact in virtual worlds with virtual scenarios and so forth. So I think this is on the horizon, but we need to be suspicious and critical with all of these technologies. Wrapping up, 2 final remarks. In my observation, what we tend to hear is a lot of talk about education in change, that somehow we have to respond to the change, that we are future takers. We have to take this future that's changing before us. We see less and hear less about the education for change in which we want. Perhaps we heard some of that in the opening sessions, the good university as an example. What is the change that we actually want, and how might digital transformation help us enable that change? And ultimately, and I'm going to play on that concept of in the book around the good university in this final quote, for me, the good university, or the good institution for education, if I want to decouple it from just universities, and digital transformation is fundamentally a conversation about what constitutes the good society and how might we achieve that society through new digital technologies. One for all, not just for the privileged. I'll stop on that note. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. So now I'd like to call on Professor Jacqueline McCormick from ATU to talk about a kind of a the first of two practical manifestations of digital transformation in higher education, the Higher Education 4.0 project. So Jacqueline, to you.
So Mark has asked me to outline the Higher Education 4.0 project as an example of one of the ways that Atlantic Technological University is responding to some of the trends that he has mentioned in his presentation. And it's important to mention at the start that in outlining the Higher Ed 4.0 project, I'm representing a large team of people who are involved in the various different aspects of this complex project. And some of them are here today, so I know they'd be happy to answer any more detailed questions that you might have. So Higher Education 4.0 is an ambitious and innovative collaborative project from Atlantic TU, which is funded by the Human Capital Initiative, or HCI, and it's part of ATU implementing our vision for agility in higher education. There are two parts to the project. The first of these is an externally facing service, which is a career learning pathways service, which provides additional support for recognition of prior learning, or RPL, and also a careers and study advisory service focused around the mycareerpath.ie website and service. And this is really focused on accessibility and future-proofing learners with employment-relevant skills. And then the second part of the project is an internally facing service, which is involving us trying to build systems which are enabling us to respond more quickly to employer and learner needs in an agile, efficient, and cost-effective way. And we also recognize within the project that having these processes in place will require more appropriate policies and regulations within ATU. So part of the project is also dedicated to developing evidence-based recommendations for policy, regulation, and process changes that may be required. So first of all, to look in more detail at the Career Learning Pathways service. So we're working to put in place the service which we believe is transforming how people interact with higher education by breaking down some of the barriers for lifelong learners and for employers. And this is incorporating a regional service for RPL and also the development of personalized career learning pathways. So the service is delivered through the mycareerpath.ie platform, and this platform facilitates the engagement with employers and potential students, and it also advises candidates on the learning pathways that are available to them and how to achieve their career and personal development goals to improve employability. So there are 5 pathways so far. The first of these is the New Beginnings pathway, which is really aimed at people at the start of their career. Then we have the Career Accelerator pathway, which is people at early stage of their career looking to progress. We have the Mastery pathway, which is for people who are kind of at mid-career stage and are looking to progress a little bit further or develop, for example, leadership skills. We have the Dream Builder pathway, which is for people who have significant experience but are looking to specialize in some particular aspects within their career. And then finally, we have the Entrepreneur pathway, which is for people who are making the transition to self-employment. So each of these pathways has a 4-stage approach. We have the first stage, which is starting blocks, which is about facilitating reflection, providing advice and direction. We then have On Your Marks, which is facilitating research on suitable courses and developing skills to prepare for higher education. We have Get Set, which is supporting the development of a career action plan and the RPL processes where appropriate. And then we have Go, which is about helping with application submission and moving towards career and personal development goals. So the mycareerpath.ie service is available to people in the workplace, to returners to education, to entrepreneurs seeking to upskill, people looking to accelerate their career and progress within their organization. But it's also available to provide support for employers who are looking to develop the skills of their workforce. So you can see there are 2 sections within the site. One of these is for the prospective learners, and the other then is for employers. And there are a wide range of tools available within mycareerpath.ie, a whole range of interactive tools to help with career assessment, to help with the RPL process and mapping out career plans. And participants can also choose to have a mentor who will guide them through the process on a one-to-one basis. And then in addition, we are aligned along with the National RPL project, and we're augmenting our supports of prospective learners to try, for those who want to gain recognition through the RPL or recognition of prior learning process. And in addition, a very important part of the project is ensuring that the Career and Learning Pathway Service meets the needs of our stakeholders. So this has involved a really extensive process of listening to the voice of industry and employers, and working on a strategy to mainstream the service within the university and beyond the lifetime of the project. So that's the first externally facing part of the project. In terms of the internally facing part of the project, so the innovation theme, this is really about trying to allow ATU to be more agile and flexible in meeting the needs of these prospective students and employers. So within the innovation theme of the project, this is, as I said, an internally facing service which is supporting academic teams. It's made up of a series of over 50 innovation sub-projects which have been put forward by academic teams right across all of Atlantic TU. And there are a whole range of different innovations in flexible and online learning and assessment. And we don't have time in this very short presentation to get into the details of these, but just to give you a flavor of a few of them. We have developed a range of work-based learning degrees across ATU where students will have an extended workplace experience whilst learning on the job alongside their academic studies, and then also developing a range of different transferable skills in likes of critical thinking and problem solving, creativity, and so on. We are also developing project-based learning opportunities. We are developing a range of micro-credential-based minor and major awards. Some of our academic teams are using adaptive learning, where students have different learning pathways through their module depending on the speed of their developing skills. And we are starting a pilot of digital credentialing system. Our instructional design team are also producing a wide range of reusable learning objects, which are then available to all of our academic teams. We are further developing our remote labs system for online and flexible learners, as well as launching a series of physical makerspaces which can be used by our students for part of their courses, but also work outside their courses to develop their skills, and also by school children in non-school visits and the likes of those types of things. We are developing several virtual reality learning experiences, including virtual building audits, virtual courtroom experience for our law students, and we are developing our ability to remotely deliver practicals in hydraulics and fluid mechanics for our engineering students. And with the support of a food production collaborator, we are setting up practicals where students can work with live feed data in real time for their practical work. And we're also developing a digital twin model to connect the virtual model of the lab with the physical lab. So that's just a whistle-stop tour through some of the different aspects of the Higher Ed 4.0 project. As you can see, there's lots of moving parts. It's a complex project. It's difficult to capture it in 10 minutes. But it's just really to give you an example of one of the ways that ATU is trying to respond to some of the trends that Mark has outlined in his presentation. So thank you.
So thank you very much, Jacqueline. Just a quick question coming in there. Is mycareerpath.ie limited to Ireland, or is it available for international users?
At the minute, it's primarily been used by Irish learners, but I'm actually not sure about that. Okay. I'm sorry. I mean, it's available on the web. It's open to anyone, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So our next speaker, again, bringing a kind of a practical aspect to this idea of digital transformation is Dr. Blanard White, DCU, and she's going to be talking about the DCU Futures Experience project.
very much for the opportunity to share with you around DCU, what we're doing in DCU Futures. And this is our experience of exploring digital transformation whilst ensuring that future fit quality and qualifications as well. So Mark outlined at the beginning of his presentation that there were 3 fundamental questions to this session, and he'd asked myself and Jacqueline to consider questions 2 and 3. And being the really analytical process chemist that I am, I've called out both questions as part of this presentation. So the first of those questions was, how can Irish education providers respond to these trends? And what I want to show to you today is DCU Futures, which is our really radical reimagination of the curriculum. And I wanted to highlight at the very beginning that both my role as Dean of Strategic Learning Innovation and that of the Transversal Skills Director, who I work really closely with, were both created to spearhead this project and to really signal DCU's intention, both internally and externally, to, as one of my colleagues put it, be serious about this and not pay lip service to it, but to explore deeply what that radical reimagination can be and how we can realize it. So this image by the Swedish artist Erik Johansson really captures for us the essence of what it is that we're trying to do in our project, which is to prepare students to thrive in a world that we really eloquently this morning heard is increasingly defined by the extent to which there's unprecedented levels of change, both at social and at technological levels. And so the student, the learner that we see in that space has come on a defined path, but with agency, with conviction, with determination, is forging their own path in a way that's going to allow them to thrive and to live a life that's of value to them and to the greater society. And that's at the heart of what it is we're trying to do. And the other thing that we need to acknowledge very strongly, which is not unique to DCU, but is something for us to consider. Mark showed earlier examples of Google with the learner places that are completely detached from universities, that fundamentally, knowledge isn't the valuable form of tradable capital that it was. If my 8-year-old wants to know something in the morning, she asks Google. Google, I still need to be there to translate at times what the answer means or to rapidly interject to suggest a different answer. But fundamentally, how we interact with knowledge has changed. And we need to really strongly acknowledge that and address that to ensure that our higher education institution is future capable going forward. And we deliberately talk around future capable as opposed to future proofing, in that proofing imagines a distinct future and then works towards that. Whereas given the level of ambiguity, uncertainty that exists right now, it's remiss of us to choose to develop towards one specific possibility. And instead, we want to have our institution and our students and our staff in that institution truly be future capable, so that whatever the future holds, we can thrive institutionally as staff members, as learners and graduates from our institution. So those are our overarching goals. And in viewing through that lens, actually it's allowed us to be unencumbered by the traditional orthodoxies that we would have assumed as set in stone. So the things that we considered in that, which are not news to anybody here, are around how the nature of work is massively changing. Career mobility is massively increasing. The career service director in DCU, Yvonne, in a recent conversation highlighted how not only is job for life dead, but we expect our current learners to not just change jobs, but to change sector at least 5 times as they move through their career. So giving them the skill set to thrive looks very differently. We keep hearing various reports of the number of jobs that are to be lost to automation, for example. So the human-centricness of the skills that we develop in our students comes to the fore in a way it never has before. And similarly to Jacqueline's project, I should acknowledge the Human Capital Initiative in funding DCU Futures such that we can have the ambitions and realize them to the extent that we have in the project. And the other critical thing from a digital transformation perspective for us to acknowledge is that COVID didn't create the trends, it accelerated them. And now as we emerge from restrictions, we have so many questions to consider. But going back to how it was before is a utopia that didn't exist then and certainly doesn't exist in this space. So they're not going away, the trends that we've seen in the last few years. So our response to that is DCU Futures. And it is at its core that radical reimagining, and it's built on 3 fundamental pillars. And critically for us, when any of the 10 new programs that we've launched as part of this, they must have all 3 pillars in it. They can't just go with the next evolution in what students are learning, but to transforming how our students learn and embedding those transversal skills are core components to all of those new programs. When we considered what's the next evolution of what students should learn, we took a step back to look at the world around us, to look at the trends that we see going forward. And we considered things like transitioning to that zero carbon economy that need to, in the most holistic sense, support the development of a truly sustainable society. And to consider that technology is infusing our world to an increasing ubiquitousness. I don't know if that's a word, but I've made it a word, such that the next evolution, we see these emerging interdisciplinary nexus. So we have, for example, psychology and disruptive technologies, exploring what's the impact of human behavior on the extent to which technology is infusing our world right now, and how can we use human behaviors to drive and to shape what the next evolutions of those technologies will look like. So that's the what, and like I say, within DCU Futures, we have 10 new programs that we're launching that I'm really happy to talk to death with anybody about for the next 2 days if you'd like to explore that. The second critical component for us is that transforming how our students are going to learn. So we are looking at online learning as a crucial component where it enhances the student learning experience, but also similar to Jacqueline, where things like virtual labs. I said I'm a chemist, and unfortunately health and safety will never allow me as a chemist to let my students play with explosive chemicals, but I can bring them into the virtual lab to see what happens when a reaction that's completely benign at the gram scale becomes explosive when you scale to kilograms and greater. We're engaging more strongly with a renewed focus with enterprise, and exploring different ways that we know from evidence. We have the Institute of Education in DCU, we have a phenomenal teaching enhancement unit. So we know from the scholarship of teaching and learning different ways that will enhance and create a greater student learning experience. And so we're bringing those into each of our programs. And then the third component is increasing the importance or the transversal skills, and the development of transversal skills has always been important to us in DCU. But increasingly, as we move to a world where to create eminently employable graduates who will thrive in the work the life that they choose to lead, the transversal skills are what's going to give them that platform, that springboard to thrive in that life. And so we need, in DCU Futures, to elevate the importance of that and to make far more explicit and give students the vocabulary to describe their transversal skills in more detail. And that's the third component of DCU Futures. And as the speakers before me and Mark mentioned, it's not just the digital piece or the new programs piece, it's everything. So to realize DCU Futures, we've had to pull so many threads together. So that's everything from increasing the numbers of academic developers and colleagues with expertise in digital technologies and how to use those in a way that's of benefit to students. We've had to build flexibility that previously wasn't there into our approval processes and the process we have in DCU to enable this agility to permeate through what it is that we do. And we're explicitly designing in those transversal skills and that flexibility to be able to respond to trends as they emerge. So it's been a huge institutional-wide project and deep dive for us to realize DCU Futures. And then the second of the two questions that I spoke to Mark about was, what are some key lessons for us with regard to trying to harness digital transformation? What have we learned so far? And Futures is 2 years into the project, so about the halfway point. So it's a useful time for us to be able to look back. And I wanted to share with you one of the most relevant learnings I think that certainly I've experienced for us. And the first was in terms of having everybody be on the same page when we start talking around digitalization of the different modalities. So having that clear set of definitions. What do we mean when we talk about hybrid versus high flex? Can we get everybody on the same page? But when we started to do that, we realized we weren't having the right conversation. So the conversation for us when we talked around modalities was limited and was restricted. And once we had everybody on the same page, actually where we needed to move the conversation to was not with regard to what type of modality we should use, but rather to go right back to the learning design, go back to the curriculum and explore how can we use evidence-based scholarship of teaching and learning, be informed by pedagogy and assessment principles, and frame the conversations in that, and see where digital transformation and where modalities fit in that broader conversation. But even now, that's restrictive for us. And so I've been following on Twitter the conversation that's been led by Tim Fawns around how you decouple pedagogy and technology. And so it begins with the illusion that everybody's afraid of, that tech is driving the pedagogy, that we are always taking the next shiny thing and embedding that because it's cool and shiny and it's nice words. So the driver is the technological aspects, not the pedagogy itself. And while that's an illusion, that's not the reality. Instead, we say, well, no, actually we need to move to where pedagogy is driving the conversation. But actually that's an illusion too. And instead, what we actually have is this rich, multifaceted, nuanced conversation where they're intermixed and where they're what Tim calls entangled. But actually, and really strongly from this morning's conversation, what's really clear is we need to move beyond this actuality to the contextualization of this, where we consider what's the purpose of what we're trying to achieve in these modules, in these programs, and how can we consider both the context as well as the pedagogy and the technologies to achieve our greater aims. And so with that learning, I think I'm on time and haven't gone over, so I'll hand you back. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Blunny. I'm going to ask Walter Balfe to join us up on stage now, who's going to talk, Walter Balfe from QQI, who's going to discuss reference the QQI guidelines on online delivery, which Mark is taking responsibility for. Thank you, Walter.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks to everybody, all the previous speakers. I think there is a sort of confluence to what has been said to what we want to do, or what I want to talk about this morning, which is a project that QQI is engaged in to develop and disseminate statutory QA guidelines for blended and online learning. We are a qualifications and quality assurance agency. So both of those elements of our name are really important to us, and we think to the sector generally. So we are going to be publishing early next year QA guidelines for all providers, further and higher, to help those providers put in place good quality assurance of those programs which use blended and or online, fully online technologies and approaches to teaching and learning. It's not an easy task, and it emerges from what is probably a mandatory thing to mention at all inputs now is the pandemic. No talk gets away without mentioning COVID or the pandemic, but it has been a watershed for education and training generally, I think. As has been pointed out, trends that were already happening were accelerated rapidly during the pandemic or during COVID, when education and training had to pivot from traditional contexts and methodologies to blended and online. So that was an opportunity to learn. Much of that transition was imposed or forced and not always managed in the best way, but things continued. And as Padraig says, the research we did showed that things continued and learning and learners did not suffer unduly. But much was learned, and we want to now capture what was learned and build on that and establish and capture guidance for providers as to what should be done if this is to be a permanent mode or modality that they use for their programs and for their learners. So it is an opportunity, and there's no going back. There's opportunities for learners and there's opportunities for providers. And it's not just a response. It's an opportunity to innovate and do things differently and better. So what we want to do is try and capture that. How do you do that? How do you make it good? Dr. Doyle this morning talked about good and bad. And what we want to do is try and capture what is good and what needs to be there to make it good. So we're using this opportunity, and I think even this pause period after the emergency has been good. Like, people have sort of taken a breath and reflected and seen, well, now what are we going to carry forward? What did we learn? What did we do well? And what was not so good that we don't want to do again? So we want to look at, again, that the QA of those QA guidelines, the two words, the quality. What would constitute quality? What is good about the way we deliver or the way we facilitate blended and online learning, and what's not good? So it's an opportunity for us collectively to try and distill that out. What would be good quality? And also to reflect on the second letter of QA, assurance. Assurance it's a strange word. To me, it's an active verb. It's what we have to do to assure. It's an active set of approaches and ways and checks to see, are we achieving good? So these guidelines will be for all providers. They'll be statutory and will apply further and higher, public and private. And what we want to do in QQI is capture national and international best practice around this area. Capture it, get it down, and then disseminate it so that it's there as a resource for all providers. And we have engaged expertise to do that. And that's where Professor Brown and his colleagues in the National Institute of Digital Learning in DCU have been contracted by QQI to develop these guidelines in consultation with the sector and in using research of international and national best practice. And we've already seen some of the work that's already going on, which we would like to capture and leverage and build on. We've had recently some listening sessions online for stakeholders, primarily providers and other experts with an interest in this area and with a voice and ideas. So that will continue in various forms, and we will be producing in the new year draft guidelines for consultation. But even as of now, one thing that I really noticed last week was a desire for some clarity and definition. Even in the last few speakers, we can see that the level of change and the rapidity of development in this area. And there is a need to try and get some fixed points, even a common language, common set of terminology, which is understood in Ireland. And that will be one of the main contributories or contributions of these guidelines, is for a period anyway, some fixed points and some clarity around what providers can and should do to try and assure quality. So on our consultation page on the QQI website, there's an opportunity for you and anyone else to contribute your views as to what is quality. And we've asked you to contribute under 3 headings. One is organizational. As a provider, at an organizational level, what is important to have in your quality assurance system if you're electing to offer programs blended and online? At a program level, what do you need to do in program design, in delivery, in assessment, and all of those issues we heard about earlier? What do you need to do to make that process, the program level process? That's where it hits the ground. What will make a good program and what will maintain a good program? And lastly, it is about what this enables learners to do. There's fantastic opportunities for learners to deal with some of the limitations and structures or restrictions that we now have in our society. There's great opportunities here. But what are the things that we need to do to ensure that the learner experience is still good? Right, there are issues about fully remote, if you want to use that word, and I'm cautious about using any, but if you want to use that phrase, what are the things that the learner experience is impacted on if we go that route? Does it suit every learner? How would you know which learner? And so on. So these are the things we need your views on. We need contributions. Professor Brown and his colleagues will gather, distill, and then disseminate. And we hope that this is a valuable contribution to the whole sector. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Walter. And yeah, I can really echo that contextualizing within the organization, within the program, and within the learner. And it's a really simple but fantastic way of allowing institutes to kind of capture the quality assurance that's required around blended and online learning. So we now have some time for a bit of a discussion amongst the panel, and I'd like to start really by going to Amanda Butler, who is the QA coordinator for Kilkenny and Carlow ETB. Start with Amanda with this whole idea of digital transformation. I mean, what does that bring? What does that mean for the practical and the skill-based learning that you would find in an ETB?
Thanks, Tony. Thanks to QQI for having me on the panel today. So I suppose Walter mentioned opportunities for learners, and we've heard from many speakers, I suppose, about the challenges out there for society. And the FETS, the further education and training sector, has many opportunities for learners in terms of addressing the housing crisis, our apprenticeship programs, the hospitality, the shortage in workers there, healthcare and childcare sectors, the really valuable roles that FET graduates play in society. And I think it's just important to maybe recognise that role first, and then look at how do we train our FET learners. And when you look at FET, it sits kind of between secondary school and higher education. And for lots of our learners, higher education and the studying that's involved is not for them. And a lot of our learners often haven't had a positive experience engaging at second level. So if we can take out some of the reading and writing and bring some more digital and digitization into our teaching, learning and assessment, I think it's really of benefit to the learners in the FET sector.
Okay. I think with both Jacqueline and Bláthnaid, we saw some really good practical examples of digital impacting in the classroom. This idea, Mark, I'm going to come to yourself next. This idea of digital transformation for all. Is digital transformation for all, or are we seeing are we able to bridge the gap between HE and FE with digital transformation, or is digital transformation necessarily comprehensive concept? Yes,
For
Mark.
me,
Yeah.
I guess the most transformative thing in our generation has actually been the internet. That's the real butterfly, if you like. It took quite a long time to come, but that's been the transformative innovation in the last 20 years that has fundamentally changed societies, living, learning, and so forth. But the dirty little secret in Ireland, and this was exposed during COVID and well documented as well as well researched, is there are many people who do not have the kind of access to the internet that some of us just take for granted. So, transformation is a wonderful thing, but you have to have the infrastructure to start with, which is why I'm a little bit skeptical about the metaverse. Some of you might be old enough to remember Second Life and how we were going to have these virtual worlds. The bandwidth just wasn't there. So, I think we can talk in theory about what it means for all, but we also need to understand that we have deep-seated structural inequities in most developed societies. Arguably, the US would be one of the largest in terms of the disparity between the rich and the poor, but it's also the one with the greatest investment in education. So for me, we can't expect digital technologies to change this. We have to change our vision, our ambitions, and hence why I finished talking about the good society.
So just following up on that idea of changing vision and changing infrastructure, some of the examples of some of the work that Jacqueline, you were talking about in terms of higher education 4.0, are you coming up against any kind of barriers to allowing you to bring that innovative change through the project, through the career path?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are lots of different barriers that exist in terms of people being just averse to wanting to change the way things that have always been done in a certain way, and being averse maybe to taking risks in terms of new innovations. And also, within the higher education sector, the pace of being able to implement the policies and quality assurance processes that are necessary for these things to be done right can sometimes move at a glacial pace because universities are operating through committee structure, and it can take a long time, and that's certainly one of the barriers. So there are plenty of barriers, and I guess it's about in terms of the funding that we would get for the likes of the project, like Higher Ed 4.0 has kind of really facilitated accelerating some of the innovations that we would have really have planned and wanted to do, but it's really accelerated the pace of that being able to happen, and also being open to innovation and to new things as well. So there are some barriers and some facilitators.
And to yourself, Blani, you spoke about reimagining of undergraduate learning. I mean, is that possible within the current culture and structure of higher education in Ireland?
I would say, I think it's based on my experience in DCU, it is. That's not to say that, as Jacqueline said, that there are challenges with that in terms of how our structures are set up, how, to be fair, really tired colleagues are, having gone through keeping the show on the road the whole way during COVID, and so that their capacity to be enthusiastic and excited about a fundamental reimagining. At times, you can't expect that to be 100% enthusiastic, but certainly what we've explored is what we found is that when the perspective is that of the learner, and the driver is that enhanced learning experience for the learner, that fundamentally all of us who are privileged enough to be teaching in a higher education institution, that's why we are there. Yeah. So that's a phenomenal enabler of the change that's required to see the types of innovation for that fundamental reimagining that we talk about.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to talk about, or ask a little bit about standardization in QA and how digital transformation enables that. But I just want to go to Slido and along AI-generated essays, how do you see digital transformation procedures and QA procedures evolving for outsourcing for online learners? Anybody want to volunteer that one? An answer to that?
I'm feeling very nervous after Walter's talking about these new guidelines. The fundamental thing, you want to under-promise and over-deliver, but what I am witnessing with colleagues around Europe and elsewhere in the world is what I personally describe as the whitewashing of online learning right now.
Okay.
So I'm hearing people talk about a return to campus-based instruction. We're a place-based university. The real education, we all know, has to take place on a campus, doesn't it? Before COVID, even at Stanford, only 50% of students went to lectures. I quote a popular media source, not a well-researched source. This binary between offline and online is a false binary.
Yes.
So that's one of the challenges we will have in the guidelines project. What do we really mean by modalities? And Leonard captured that, and Walter as well. So for me, if we're really talking about reimagination and transformation of that big T, I want to be quite pragmatic and say assessment is perhaps where we should start. And in the whitewashing of online learning, I'm seeing a return to traditional assessment practices, despite some really imaginative things that were forced on us during COVID. And we are asking students still to go and write for 3 hours with a pen. I personally could not hold a pen for 3 hours. I don't know where else in life you are now required to do that. We are training for memories, not educating minds, to quote from a famous quote from David Perkins. And here's our opportunity to create more authentic opportunities with new technologies that are much more for the authentic real world we work within.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Amanda, just to come back to yourself there with a question regarding examples of innovation and shaping of the future of education that are happening in the FA sector. Could you inform us of that?
Yeah, I suppose I can and I can't. My own role is in quality assurance, so I can talk around that. I suppose in terms of QA and what we're doing, and I suppose I don't want to hear a collective groan from the audience now, but it would be about policies and procedures and you know, trying to put a framework on, you know, how we would approach the digitization in education, how we would quality assure that, how we would make sure that however assessments are done, teaching and learning is done, that you're meeting the requirements of the award, and how you're being fair and consistent to learners. They're the kind of cornerstones of our approach to things in Kenny and Carlow ETB.
And we spoke previously about this idea that digital transformation is helping that process, and something this idea of standardization, allowing for the QA process to be that bit easier. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, I suppose like for us, consistency is key, you know, and trying to get consistency within our ETB to across centres, and you know, if we have like established a community of practice around e-portfolios, for instance, and even that, having that conversation, having people talking the same language, and having support. I think support is very important, and there's a big role for QA in terms of support as well. So there's probably lots of different ways that, you know, in QA we can support the digitization also, yeah.
Okay, and just staying on that, maybe just finishing off with yourself, Walter, this idea of, you know, standardized QA, there's possibly a conflict there or an idea that, you know, if we go too far in terms of standardization in the QA, are we allowed to, are the guidelines going to allow us to kind of capture the kind of innovation that Blonnie and Jacqueline were talking about within the framework of QA guidelines, given that we're talking about moving towards a bit more standardization with digital transformation?
Yeah, well, QA guidelines by their nature, and particularly these ones that have to stretch across all providers from level 10 down to level 1, they're never going to be that standardized or impose that level of standardization that everything has to be done in a particular way. What it will expect of providers is that the process is assured.
Yes.
And I think if you take those 3 layers, organizational, program, and learner, at an organizational level, I think it's critical that every provider, in whatever scale and whatever level of whatever type of online or blended learning they want to do, the rationale and the understanding of why they're doing that and for what purpose is critical. And that then filters down into the way it's implemented at a program level, the pedagogy and the range of innovations and the range of ways it can be used, and then the learner experience on those programs. They all have to fit and fall out of that. Mm-hmm. So the provider understanding of why it's using these technologies and in what way and what that means for the organization at an organizational level, at a program level, and at the learner experience level. That applies to all contexts, but it doesn't have to mean that some innovations are too far or some things shouldn't have any online. It's all about deciding what are we going to do and why, and then follow that down.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all the panel, and especially to Mark, who put this collection of people together and this plenary session together, which is now coming to a close. I'd just like to leave with the final thought coming in from Slido, which is, I wonder if innovate. Oh no, that's not the one. Oh yeah, here we are. Are we the right generation to introduce all this digital transformation? We are most definitely not the native users of the digital language. And a slightly controversial point to finish on, but very interesting as well. Is the digital native in this room right now? Okay, and with that, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody on the panel, and especially to Mark. Thank you.